Close your eyes for a moment. It is 2003. You are standing outside a small electronics shop in Jakarta, in Cairo, in Sao Paulo, in Mumbai. The shop window has one phone in it, just one, and it is a Nokia. The woman behind the counter has a Nokia. The delivery man walking past has a Nokia. The school kid crossing the street has a Nokia. You reach into your own pocket, and yes, you have a Nokia too. That was the world. Not a metaphor. Not an exaggeration. At its peak, 1 out of every 3 mobile phones on the planet was a Nokia. 1 in 3. The company owned a number so large, it almost has no meaning. $140 billion. That is what Nokia was worth. Not just a company. Civilization inside a company. 38 countries. 123,000 employees. Factories running day and night in Finland, Hungary, Mexico, and China. Engineers so good they were called the best in the world, not by Nokia, but by their competitors. And then it was gone. Not slowly, not painfully. It collapsed in the time it takes a child to finish primary school. And at the center of that collapse was a single man. A single letter and a single decision that the whole world would later call the biggest corporate mistake in history. Oh, yeah, this is that story. To understand what Nokia lost, you have to understand what Nokia was. Finland is a country of 5.5 million people, most of them surrounded by forest and silence for months of dark winter. It is not a country that shouts. It is a country that builds. There is even a Finnish word sisu that has no direct translation in English. It means something like grit or stubbornness, or the decision to keep going when everything tells you to stop. Nokia was sisu in corporate form. The company started in 1865, not as a phone company, but as a paper mill on the banks of a river. For 100 years, it made rubber boots and cables and televisions. It nearly went bankrupt twice. Each time it survived. By the 1990s, Nokia had made a decision that most companies do not have the courage to make. It sold everything else and went all in on one thing: mobile phones. That bet changed the world. In 1998, Nokia became the world's largest mobile phone manufacturer. Their 3310 model, released in 2000, became so famous that 20 years later people were still making jokes about it surviving a nuclear explosion. The engineers in Espoo, Finland, designed phones the way Finnish craftsmen made furniture. Built to last, built to work, built with a quiet pride that never needed to announce itself. Inside the company, there was a culture that outsiders found hard to understand. Engineers were heroes. The people who actually built things were respected more than the people who managed things. There were no big egos in the corridors, just work. Serious, careful, world-class work. What I find remarkable even now is that this culture, this strength, is exactly what made Nokia so vulnerable to what was coming. Because the iPhone did not attack Nokia's hardware. Nokia's hardware was better. It attacked something Nokia had never had to think about before: software. In June 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and held up a small glass rectangle. An iPod, he said. A phone and an internet communicator. Nokia's engineers watched the keynote. Some of them laughed. The iPhone had a worse camera than Nokia's best models. Its battery life was poor. It could not even send a picture message properly. Finnish engineer could list 20 things wrong with it before lunch. But the people watching from the audience did not care about the list. They cared about how the phone felt in their hands. They cared about the screen that responded to a touch like it was alive. They cared about the app store that arrived the following year, a marketplace of ideas that let a teenager in a bedroom compete with a global corporation. Nokia had touchscreen prototypes. They had app store concepts. They had internal projects that looked terrifyingly like the iPhone years before the iPhone existed. But inside a company of 123,000 people, new ideas move like ships in harbor. Slowly, carefully, with a great deal of paperwork. By 2010, Nokia's market share was falling every quarter. Their smartphone operating system, called Symbian, was built for the phones of 2005, not the phones of 2010. Developers hated it. Consumers were confused by it. Internally, everyone knew it was broken. The board of directors made a decision. They needed someone from outside to fix it, someone who understood the new world of software and ecosystems, someone who had worked at the intersection of technology and strategy, They found Stephen Elop. He was Canadian. He had run Microsoft's business division. He wore plain suits and spoke carefully, and gave the impression of a man who had thought deeply about everything he was about to say. Nokia announced his appointment in September 2010. He was the first non-Finnish CEO in the company's 5-year history. That detail at the time seemed like progress. On the 9th of February 2011, for months after taking the job, Stephen Elop sent a memo to every single Nokia employee. It was not a normal memo. He began by telling a story. A man stands on an oil rig in the North Sea. In the middle of the night, an explosion tears through the platform. Fire everywhere. The man runs to the edge. Below him, 60 feet down, is the freezing North Atlantic. He jumps. He jumped, Elop wrote, because burning was not survival. Then he said the quiet part out loud. "We are standing on a burning platform," he told his own employees in writing. In a document that he must have known would leak within hours, that Nokia's products were failing, that their ecosystem was burning, the competition was winning on every front. The memo was meant to create urgency inside the company. What it created was a funeral. Within days, the memo was everywhere. Every journalist, every analyst, every competitor read it. Customers who had been undecided about upgrading their Nokia suddenly had their answer. Investors who had been waiting to see whether Nokia could recover now had confirmation from the CEO himself that it could not. Sales dropped. Immediately, but the memo was only the first act. The second act was the announcement that came 2 days later. Nokia would not adopt Android, the free Google-backed operating system that Samsung, HTC, and a dozen other manufacturers were already using to fight the iPhone. Instead, Nokia would partner exclusively with Microsoft. Every Nokia smartphone going forward would run Windows Phone. The industry stopped and stared. Android was free. Android had momentum. Android had 330,000 apps at the time of the announcement. Windows Phone had less than 10,000. Nokia's engineers had built a new operating system called MeeGo that was almost ready, a system built in Finland. For Nokia, designed specifically for the next generation of their hardware. Elop canceled it. He bet a $140 billion empire on a platform that at the time of the announcement had less than 2% of the global market. Here is what the numbers looked like on the factory floor. In the city of Salo, in southwestern Finland, Nokia employed 24,000 people. The factory there had been running since 1979. 3 generations of the same families had worked inside it. A man's father had built phones there. His son had just started. When the Windows partnership was announced, the orders began to slow. When the first Windows phones launched in late 2011 and the reviews came back lukewarm, the orders slowed further. By 2012, the Salo factory was operating at a fraction of its capacity. Nokia announced it would close. In Hungary, in Romania, in Mexico, in China, the same pattern repeated. 23,000 jobs cut in 2012 alone. By 2013, Nokia employed fewer people globally than the city of Salo had once employed locally. What is hard to calculate and what never appears in the quarterly earnings reports is the weight that sits in a community when its one industry leaves: the restaurants that lose their lunch customers, the schools that lose their students, families that pack their cars and move to cities where the work is, the ones who stay behind, in houses suddenly worth half what they used to be. Nokia did not cause this alone. The iPhone caused this. The market caused this. The 20 years of incremental decisions that left Nokia without a competitive software platform caused this. But Elop's choices, the memo that killed consumer confidence, the Windows bet that burned through Nokia's remaining time, the cancellation of MeeGo just as it was reaching maturity, these were not the work of the market. These were decisions made by one man in one room. By 2013, the collapse was complete. Nokia's phone division, the part of the company that had once made 1 in 3 of every mobile phone on Earth, was sold to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. Not $140 billion, 7.2. A number so much smaller that the comparison almost requires a second reading. Whether those decisions were brave or reckless depends, as it always does, on where you were standing when the fire reached you. At the announcement press conference, Nokia CEO Risto Salima said something that was reported around the world. He said that at the board meeting where they voted to accept Microsoft's offer, grown men were crying. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said, "but somehow we lost." That sentence has stayed with analysts and historians ever since, because it is both true and not true at the same time. Nokia's engineers did not do anything wrong. The people on the factory floor in Salo did not do anything wrong. The Finnish identity that was built into every product, the sisu, the quiet excellence, the obsession with hardware quality, none of that was the problem. But someone made the decision to cancel MeeGo. Someone signed the exclusive contract with Microsoft. Someone wrote the burning platform memo and sent it to 123,000 people before the market opened. Decisions are not made by companies. They're made by people. Steven Elop returned to Microsoft after the sale, the company he had come from, the company that had just paid $7.2 billion for the empire he had presided over. Microsoft later wrote off almost the entire acquisition as a loss. He received a $25 million payout when the deal closed. The story of Nokia is not a simple story. It is not the story of a lazy company that refused to change. Nokia changed constantly. They invented things before anyone else invented them. They saw the future clearly enough to build prototypes of it years in advance. It is not purely the story of one bad CEO. The problems started before Ilip arrived. Symbian crisis was real. Competitive gap with Apple and Google was real. Any leader who took that job in 2010 faced a genuine structural problem with no easy answer. But this is what I keep returning to every time I go through the research. The burning platform memo destroyed consumer confidence in 2 days. 2 days, a company can survive a bad product. It can survive a bad quarter. It cannot easily survive its own CEO announcing to the world that the company is on fire. The Windows bet was not irrational. Microsoft had money and global reach and a genuine desire to compete in mobile. But it was exclusive. There was no plan B when Windows Phone failed to catch on. Nokia had nothing left. MeeGo, the operating system they built themselves in Finland, for Nokia launched on exactly one phone before it was cancelled. That phone, the Nokia N9, received some of the best reviews Nokia had ever received. Reviewers called it beautiful. They called it elegant. They said it was exactly what Nokia needed. It shipped in limited quantities in markets where Windows Phone was not yet available, and it was gone. The cold lesson of Nokia is this: size does not protect you. History does not protect you. 140 years of sisu does not protect you. The only protection is the willingness to be honest about what is changing, and the courage to change with it, not by burning the platform yourself, but by building the next one before the fire arrives. Go to Finland today. Drive to Salo. The factory is still there, repurposed now, smaller, quieter. Some of Nokia's engineers still work there, building network equipment for 5G. The company survived by becoming something different. Something without the name recognition it once had. Something few people under 30 have a strong feeling about. The phones are gone. Empire's a memory. And somewhere in a filing cabinet, there's a memo about a burning platform.